Today we're going to build a game to catch a butterfly. In part one of Catch the Butterfly, we added the score and the animation of the butterfly. And it was a working game where the player got points for keeping or clicking on the butterfly. So in part two of this game, we're going to add a timer and a high score to make it more fun. So the first thing you'll want to do in your code is start with when flag clicked. Okay, so now we're going to make the timer work. So we want to show the timer on the screen. Click on the circle variables and check the box next to timer. Okay, this is a different view. You can do a normal readout and timer should appear in the top underscore. Okay, while you're here, you'll also want to show high score, and we can get the high score to work later. So the high score will also appear in the corner. You can move these around. I'm going to move the scores to the right side of the screen and keep the timer in the top left. Okay, so when the game starts, I'm going to forever compare the timer to 0. I also want to set the timer to 0. So let's start by setting the timer to 0 when the game starts. So drag out a set block and change the field that you want to set to a number. So we're going to count down. You can set this number to 10, 20, 30. I would recommend a lower number while you get your game to work. And then within there, you actually want to forever compare the timer to 0. So drag out a forever and then drag out an if then. These are all in the control circle, these blocks. Okay, so in order to compare the timer to 0, you need an operator. That's a green block. Click on operators and drag out an equals operator and drag that into the if block. If timer equals 0 is what you want. So click on variables and drag out the timer variable, put it in your first bubble, and then type 0 in your second bubble. So if the timer has hit 0, that means you're at the end of the game and you want to change your backdrop. So go to looks and drag out a switch backdrop block, and your backdrop will be game over when the timer is 0. When the timer is 0, you also want to compare the player's score to the high score. So you need another if then. Go to controls and drag out an if then and put that right under the purple block. Switch backdrop to. Then you'll want to go to operators. And this is where you're comparing the score to the high score. So drag out a greater than operator block. Put that inside your second if. And this is where you compare score to high score. So go to the variables circle and drag out a score and high score variable. So you will be comparing score first. So put score in the first bubble and compare that to high score, which goes in the second bubble. If the score, the player score, is greater than the all-time high, then you're going to set high score to score. So drag out a set block from the variables circle area. Set high score to, and that should be score. So drag a score variable into that second bubble. And you've set the high score to be the player's current score. Then you actually want to tell the player what happened, right? Because they won't know. So you want to go to looks and you want to change your backdrop to high score. Okay. So that's all done when the game ends. When the timer 0, change the backdrop to the game over and then compare score to high score. If the player score is greater than high score, then set the high score to the player score and change the backdrop to tell the player that they have a new high score. And that actually ends the game, so you want to go to Control and Stop All. And you want to drag that just under the second if. Okay, so you now need one more piece of functionality. You haven't actually made the timer count down, right? You just checked that it's 0. So it starts at 10 and you need to add the logic to count it down to 0. So you'll want to go to variables and drag out a change block. Drag that into the game. And underneath, inside your forever loop, but underneath the if-thens. And you're not going to change high score, you're going to change timer. And you want to change the timer by -1. So this is just the variable that you're changing. So the player will actually see the timer go down by -1, but you need to tell the program how long to wait. So you're going to count in seconds, so you want to wait 1 second and then count down again by -1. Right? So if you want to change the timer by a certain increment, just make sure that the program is actually waiting by that increment. Okay, so now we can test the game. So when we start, timer starts at 10. And we didn't actually, it looks funny now. But if you hit the green flag, the score will be accurate. Right? It starts at 0 and high score was just running like crazy, so it's super high. We can fix that later. You can see my timer's actually counting down and the game over screen shows when the timer reaches 0. So that part's working and the score was also working, but the high score, it actually went really high because I hadn't tested correctly. So just for the short term, I'm going to reset the high score. So I'm going to go to variables and I'm going to drag out a set high score to 0 when the flag is clicked. And when I click the green flag, it actually resets the high score. Okay, now that that's working though, I don't always want to reset the high score, so I'm going to remove that from my game. And I'm going to test again. And since I'm the first player, it should set my score to the high score. All right, so that was correct. My score is a new high score, and that's 2. Timer has reached 0, and you can see the high score set to 2. Okay, so that was part 2. The butterfly game is now complete, and you have a game with a timer and a high score. So I would go back and set my timer to a higher number, like 30 seconds, to make this more fun now that it's working. That's it for today. Hope you had a great time, and see you next time. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, please follow, like, and subscribe for more.